Okay, today's lesson is called absolute value. Okay, so what absolute value is? It's making numbers with a magnitude only with no regard for direction. So an example that I wrote was talking about distance. In physics, you would write 5 kilometers north with a direction of north or plus, and 5 kilometers south. In physics, you would include that direction and say it's like a -5, okay? But with absolute value, we're going to disregard the direction and just say the absolute value of it is 5. Because it's like a distance, you can't take a negative distance. Okay? So if I am talking about going 5 kilometers north, I'm really just talking about a distance of 5. And if I'm talking about a direction of going 5 kilometers south, I don't care because I'm just talking about a distance of 5. Okay? So let's talk about absolute values. So can you go a positive distance? Yeah. Can you go a 0 distance? Yeah. Can you go a negative distance? No. So you can't do that. So that's what we're going to work on. We're going to change that negative distance to just call it the number. Okay, and then something that's probably new for you, I don't think you've ever seen these brackets. So these are called just line brackets. That's the absolute value symbol. Okay, so it's in math, they're treated like a bracket. So when you think about BEDMAS stuff, it's a bracket situation. Okay, so here's the first idea. So what's the absolute value of 3? The magnitude of that is 3. What's the absolute value of -3? That has a magnitude of 3. Okay, next question. You're going to have to do some bracket work. So what's in the bracket? So what's 2 subtract 7? Well, that's -5. And then, hey, what's the absolute value of -5? 5. Bracket work. So I have to do 10 subtract 2, which is 8. And what's the magnitude of that? 8. Okay. What's the absolute value of -15? Well, that's 15. But then I have to multiply, but that's after. So this answer is negative, okay? And the reason is that negative is outside, and it's an afterthought. Okay. So solving equations. I could take the absolute value of 4. That would work. But I could also do what? I could absolute -4. Because the absolute 4 is 4, and the absolute of -4 is also 4. They both have magnitudes of 4. Okay, so you're going to kind of be splitting this into 2 options. Okay, so here we go. This is kind of the gist of how we're going to do it. I could put 10 or -10 inside the bracket. So I could have made the inside of this bracket 10, or I could have made the inside of that bracket -10. So x would equal 5, or x would equal -5. Okay, we're going to split. Inside this bracket, I could have used a 5 or a -5. So inside this bracket could have been a 5, or inside that bracket could have been a -5. Okay, so you keep what you have in there, and then you split that you could have had the plus or the minus version. So here, if I add 2, I get 7 or -3. Okay? So don't treat it like this where it's just plus minus 5. That's not what you're doing. You're having to solve differently. Okay, can you try this one on your own? See where you go. It's the same as this one. So split the inside of this, saying you could make it 11, or the inside you could say is -11. Okay, did we work out 6, -16? Okay, on this one, you cannot split this right now, okay? Algebraically, we want to remove that before we split. Okay, so also I need to see that you've kept your brackets on there until you split, okay? So you have to remove that 5 part first, and then you can do the split scenario. Okay, so this bracket part could have been an 8 or a -8. Okay, and now do you see me not having brackets? Because at this spot I'm saying the inside part could have been 8 or the inside part. Okay, so I'm going to deduct you points if you don't understand where to keep the brackets on and where to drop them. And leave fractions, leave. If you have a fraction, just leave it. Okay, next one. Okay, so again, I'm going to remove that. So I get a -2. Okay, so this one is special. What do we know? When we absolute something to get the magnitude, can we turn a magnitude into a negative value? No. Absolute is a magnitude value. It can never have a distance of -2. Okay? Okay, this last question on your own. Try it. It's going to be move the 20 part and then split. Go ahead. It's very similar to this one over here. These are the same process. Just leave as fractions. You shouldn't have to touch your calculator. Okay, that was good. I moved the 20. And then I had that absolute value and I could split it apart. Okay, so what kind of mistakes do I see? I see people doing this. I see people putting plus or minus 2 as a split and then moving the 20. Okay, that's wrong. You got to move the 20 and then split. That order has to be in their 8 steps. Okay? Okay, I need you to flip, flip, flip. Flip, flip. And then this thing says graphing an absolute value. Okay, graphing an absolute value. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about a couple things. When you see functions, you sometimes see things written as f of x. Okay, that is basically a fancy way to say y equals. Okay, so if I do this, it means to absolute value y. So what happens is you're going to take a regular point, which is xy, and then when you absolute value it, you're going to apply this idea. You're going to absolute value just the y coordinate. Okay, so there's 3 ideas. Okay, so where y is, first scenario, where y is positive, what do you do when you absolute value a positive number? For example, what's the absolute value of 6? 6. What happened? You just stay, right? The absolute value of 6 is 6. Okay, what about the value 0? What happens when you absolute value 0? Can you have a distance of 0? Yeah. So I should just stay. What about negative values? So can you have a distance of -5? Nope. So what am I going to do to the negative? I'm going to change it to +5. Okay, so positive and 0, stay put, but negative can't be a distance, so you got to change it. Okay, so here we go. I need to see these things. So kind of this part of the graph that I'm looking at, the heights are positive or 0. So I'm going to draw. I'm going to really show you here. I'm going to draw that I've overlapped that. Okay, also here, this chunk of the graph, that's good. Positive will stay put. Okay, now I have this chunk of the graph. So right now, that part is negative height-wise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to positive. So if I took a sample for like this, 1, -3, that coordinate itself will have to move to 1, +3. Okay, and that's my final graph. Okay, so on your test, I need to see the overlap. So make sure you really enforce that you've overlapped a section. Okay, number two. We're going to forget the absolute value for 1 second. I'm going to graph y equals x minus 5, just that. Okay, I'm going to do it lightly because it's not my actual graph. I'm just going to draw it in lightly. What do you know about this thing? Previous experience in math. You know a couple things about it. What's the shape of this thing? When you just have an x. Okay, you should have known that was a line because that was your whole grade 10 year of graphing. Okay, that's a line. What do you know about this line? You know a couple properties. Something about that -5 part. What's that? Your y-intercept, right? Remember that? What else do you care about on a line? How would you graph lines? You need to use the, remember, the slope of a line. Okay, what is the slope? How many x's do you have? 1. Okay, a slope with a line is how much do you rise over how much do you run. Do you remember all that stuff? That's all grade 10. Okay, so I'm going to draw this. I'm going to do it very lightly because it's not my actual graph. Okay, so here's me starting at -5 and I'm doing the staircase up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. Okay, now I have to think about absolute value in it. So what's the rules? We can be what? We're good if we're 0 or positive. That's good. We leave it. Okay? What don't we like with absolute valuing? What's not allowed? Negative. So all this down here has a negative height. So we have to change it to be positive. So you can grab a coordinate if you wanted. For instance, 0, -5 would move to 0, +5. Okay, it's like a reflection, by the way, right? You see my reflecting? Negative to positive. Okay, and this is the final graph, so you can see which part I overlapped and which part I changed. Okay, so this is my last one. I'm going to do my graph pink so that you can really see my final graph. Okay, so here I go. Which is good to leave? I can leave this chunk is good. I can leave this chunk. And I can leave that part. So those should show me overlappage. I'm good if I'm positive. I'm good if I'm 0. Those can be distances. Okay, but I don't like these parts. So the negative parts have to turn into positive parts. What am I at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm 6 down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and that is my final graph. I've showed you which parts could stay and which parts changed. Okay, so to recap, equation solving, when you're absoluting, you can say the inside equals the positive option or the inside equals the negative option. Okay, And then graphing, your idea is positive or 0 stays and negative change to positive. Okay? And that's your whole outcomes. So absolute value, the inside of the brackets could have been plus or minus. Graphing, you either stay there or change, because we don't like negatives when we absolute. We don't want the negative distances, right?